I've kept your secret for 50 years. Why did you really stay?
Because among your kind, you were the only one who saw us as people, not monsters.
I spent 23 years with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and in all that time, through every case that crossed my desk, through every interrogation room and crime scene, I believed I understood the boundaries of what was possible in this world. I was wrong. What I discovered in the winter of 2007, deep in the forests of northern Idaho, didn't just challenge my understanding of biology or evolution. It shattered everything I thought I knew about humanity itself, about our origins, about the darkness we've spent millennia trying to forget. My name is Robert Kellerman. I'm 61 years old now, retired, living alone in a cabin not far from where it all happened. And for 17 years, I've kept a secret that the government classified above top secret, a secret about an interrogation that should never have taken place, with a subject that should never have existed. But silence has its own weight, and I've carried it long enough. The cold bit through my jacket that February morning as I stood outside the unmarked facility in the Clearwater National Forest. Snow fell in thick curtains, muffling sound, turning the world into something distant and unreal. I'd been pulled from my assignment in Seattle with less than 4 hours' notice. The call came at 3 in the morning from a voice I didn't recognize, using clearance codes I'd never heard before. Agent Kellerman, you have experience with unconventional interrogations. Pack for 2 weeks. Tell no one. A car will arrive at 0500 hours. That was it. No explanation, no case file, just coordinates and a directive that came from somewhere so far up the chain of command that I knew better than to ask questions. The facility itself was invisible from any road, accessible only by a logging trail that didn't appear on any map. From the outside, it looked like an abandoned research station, the kind left over from the Cold War and forgotten by bureaucracy. But the moment I stepped inside, I felt the hum of serious power running through the walls. This was operational. This was active. And whatever they were doing here, they were spending serious money to keep it hidden. A woman met me in the entrance, late 40s, no-nonsense expression, eyes that had seen things that aged you from the inside. She introduced herself as Dr. Sarah Vance, head of what she called the Cryptobiological Research Division. I'd never heard of it. That should have been my first warning. Agent Kellerman, thank you for coming on such short notice, she said, leading me through corridors that smelled of antiseptic and something else, something organic and wild that didn't belong in a government facility. I need to ask you something before we proceed. In your career, have you ever encountered a subject that you couldn't categorize, something that didn't fit into your understanding of the world? I thought about it. I've seen some strange things. People do things that don't make sense all the time. She stopped walking and turned to face me. I'm not talking about human behavior, Agent Kellerman. I'm asking if you've ever met something that wasn't human, but wasn't quite animal either. Something in between. The question hung in the air like the snow outside, cold and impossible to ignore. No, I said carefully. I haven't. She nodded slowly. You're about to, and I need you to understand something before you see it. What we have in containment downstairs is classified at a level above nuclear secrets. You will sign documents that legally prevent you from ever speaking about this. You will undergo psychological evaluation before you leave, and if you refuse to proceed right now, you'll be detained here for 72 hours anyway, just to ensure operational security. So the question is, whether you want to know what we're hiding, or whether you want to spend 3 days in a holding cell wondering. I've never been good at walking away from questions. It's what made me a decent investigator and a terrible husband. Show me, I said. We descended. The facility went deeper than I'd imagined, elevators dropping us past basement levels marked only with letters that meant nothing to me. The smell grew stronger as we went down, that wild organic scent mixing with something else now, something that reminded me of fear. We stopped at a level marked Sigma. The doors opened onto a corridor lined with observation windows, and through the glass I could see laboratories, holding cells, equipment that looked medical and military at the same time. But it was the sound that stopped me. A low vocalization, almost below the range of human hearing, resonating through the concrete and steel. Not animal, not human, something else. "We acquired the subject 9 days ago," Dr. Vance said as we walked. "A logging crew in the Selway Bitterroot Wilderness found it injured, caught in a rock slide. By the time our containment team arrived, it had been spotted by 7 civilians. We contained the situation, but barely. The subject itself was unconscious, multiple fractures, severe lacerations. We brought it here for treatment and study." She stopped in front of a door marked Isolation Chamber 3. "It regained consciousness 4 days ago. Since then, it has refused all attempts at communication. It won't eat, it won't respond to any stimulus. It just sits there, watching us, watching and waiting." She placed her hand on the door control. "We need someone who understands interrogation psychology, someone who can establish communication with a subject that doesn't want to communicate. That's why you're here." "What exactly am I about to see?" I asked. Dr. Vance met my eyes, and in them I saw something I recognized from my own mirror on bad nights. The look of someone who'd seen something that changed them. We call them Gigantopithecus americanus. You know them by another name: Bigfoot, Sasquatch, the forest people. They're real, Agent Kellerman. They've always been real, and we've been hiding that fact from the world for 60 years. She opened the door. The room beyond was large, designed like an interrogation chamber, but scaled up. Everything was massive: the table, the chairs, the observation glass. And at the far end, sitting in a reinforced chair designed to hold something tremendously strong, was a creature that shouldn't exist. It was huge. Even seated, it towered at least 8 feet, with shoulders so broad they seemed architectural rather than biological. Covered in dark brown hair that was longer around the head and shoulders, creating an almost mane-like effect. The arms hung long, hands resting on knees, and those hands were enormous, fingers thick as branches, nails that weren't quite claws but weren't human either. But it was the face that froze me in place. The face was wrong in a way that my brain struggled to process. Almost human. Heavy brow ridge, broad flat nose, jaw that protruded slightly, but the eyes, God, the eyes were completely, utterly human. Dark brown, intelligent, filled with something that looked like ancient sadness. It turned its head when I entered, and those eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made every instinct scream that I was in the presence of a person, not an animal. "Jesus Christ," I whispered. "It's real." Dr. Vance stood beside me. "It's real. They're real. We estimate there are fewer than 300 of them left in North America, scattered across the most remote wilderness areas. This is only the 4th one we've ever managed to capture alive. The others died within days. They don't respond well to captivity." The creature made that sound again, that low, resonant vocalization. It wasn't threatening. It sounded more like grief. "What do you want me to do?" I asked. "Talk to it. Establish communication. We know they understand English. We've recorded them observing humans for decades, but they've never spoken to us, never allowed themselves to be truly studied. We need to know why they hide, what they know, and most importantly," she paused, "most importantly, we need to know if they remember." "Remember what?" She looked at the creature through the glass. "Where they came from, where we all came from. Because Agent Kellerman, the DNA analysis we ran on this subject revealed something that terrifies every scientist who's seen it. These creatures aren't some undiscovered ape species. They're human, or they were. They're Homo sapiens, or close enough that the distinction barely matters genetically. They're our cousins, our siblings. And somewhere in our shared history, something happened that split us apart. Something that drove them into hiding and drove us to forget they ever existed. I spent the next hour being briefed on everything they knew, which wasn't much. The species appeared to be highly intelligent, possibly matching or exceeding human cognitive ability. They had language, culture, tool use, probably even art, though evidence was scarce because they were extraordinarily careful about leaving traces. They lived in family groups, raised their young over extended periods, and had lifespans similar to humans. They'd been hunted, killed, captured throughout history, but always in small enough numbers that the truth could be suppressed, the evidence classified, the witnesses discredited. The government had been tracking them since the 1950s, ever since a recovery team found the body of one that had been shot by a hunter who thought he was aiming at a bear. That body had changed everything, sparked a secret program that had been running for decades, slowly gathering evidence of a species that didn't want to be found. And now I was supposed to talk to one, to interrogate it, to convince it to reveal secrets it had kept for thousands of years. The absurdity of the situation would have been funny if it weren't so profoundly disturbing. I entered the interrogation chamber alone. They'd given me a comm device, a tiny earpiece through which Dr. Vance could feed me information, but I took it out before I sat down. Whatever was about to happen, I needed it to be genuine. The creature watched me approach with those impossibly human eyes. Up close, I could see details that made my anthropology minor from college feel suddenly relevant. The hair wasn't uniform. It was lighter on the chest and arms, darker on the back and head. The skin beneath, visible around the eyes and mouth, was dark brown, weathered, lined with age. This was an old individual, maybe 60, maybe older, and in its eyes I saw intelligence that made me deeply uncomfortable. "My name is Robert Kellerman," I said, sitting down across the massive table. "I'm here to talk with you, not to hurt you, just to talk." The creature didn't respond. It sat perfectly still, breathing slowly, watching me with an expression I couldn't read. "I know you can understand me," I continued. "I know you've been listening to humans for a long time, watching us, learning our languages. I'm asking you now, as one thinking being to another, to communicate with me, to help me understand." Nothing, just that steady, unnerving gaze. I tried a different approach. "You're injured. We've been treating your wounds. The fractures are healing. You're safe here. No one is going to hurt you." At that, something changed in its expression. Not anger exactly, but something darker. It opened its mouth, and for the first time, I heard it make a sound that wasn't that low vocalization. It was something between a laugh and a growl, bitter and knowing. Then it did something that made my breath catch. It raised one massive hand and pointed at me. Then it pointed at itself. Then it made a gesture, hands coming together and pulling apart, over and over. It was showing me separation, division. It was telling me that we were the same, but we'd been torn apart. "You understand that we're related?" I said. "You know about the DNA, the connection between your people and mine?" It nodded. A clear, deliberate human nod. My heart hammered. This was real communication. This was confirmation of consciousness, of understanding. "Will you talk to me? Will you tell me your story?" The creature stared at me for a long moment. Then it raised its hand again and made a series of gestures. It pointed to its throat, made a sound, then shook its head. It pointed to its mouth, showed me the structure of its jaw, the placement of its tongue. It was explaining that it couldn't produce human speech. The vocal anatomy was different. "But you can communicate in other ways," I said. "Gestures, drawings, we can bring you materials." Another nod. Then it made a gesture I didn't understand, a complicated movement of its hands that seemed to mean something specific. I stood up slowly. "I'm going to get paper and drawing materials. Will you wait? Will you try to communicate?" It watched me with those ancient eyes. Then it placed one hand over its chest, over where a human heart would be, and held it there. I didn't know what it meant, but I felt the weight of it, the significance. I left the chamber and returned 10 minutes later with large sheets of paper, charcoal pencils, markers. The creature's eyes focused on the materials immediately. I placed them on the table and stepped back. "Show me," I said. "Show me what you want me to know." The creature reached out with surprising delicacy, those massive hands handling the charcoal with careful precision, and it began to draw. Not random marks, deliberate, structured images. It drew two groups of figures, clearly humanoid, standing side by side. One group it made slightly taller, broader, the other more slender, smaller. It pointed to the tall figures, then to itself, then to the smaller figures, and to me, our ancestors, together. Then it drew more. It showed the two groups moving apart, the smaller ones spreading across a landscape, while the larger ones retreated into mountains and forests. It drew symbols I didn't recognize at first, until I realized they were meant to represent time passing, seasons, years, millennia. It was showing me the great divergence, when our species split, when we became us and them. But then it drew something that made my skin crawl. It showed the smaller figures, my ancestors, hunting. And they weren't hunting animals. They were hunting the larger figures. It showed spears, fire, groups of humans attacking lone individuals of its kind. It showed violence and death and deliberate extermination. The creature paused in its drawing and looked at me, and in its eyes I saw something that pierced me like ice. Accusation, pain, the memory of genocide. "We hunted you," I whispered. "Early humans hunted your people." It nodded slowly. Then it drew more, and with each image, my horror grew. It showed its people running, hiding, retreating into the deepest wilderness. It showed their numbers dwindling, their groups scattered. It showed humans spreading across the entire world, while its kind was pushed to the edges, forced to live in the margins, to hide, to become myths and legends, because existence in the open meant death. And then it drew something that changed everything. It drew a human figure standing over one of its people, not with violence, but with something that looked like curiosity. It drew more humans gathering around, examining, studying, and then it drew cages, laboratories. It drew its people being taken, experimented on, cut open, studied like specimens. It drew recent history, the last 100 years. It drew what looked like government facilities, soldiers, scientists. It was showing me that the hunting never stopped. It just became more sophisticated, more clinical, more hidden. We'd gone from spearing them in the forest to capturing them in the name of science. The cruelty remained the same. "How many?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "How many of your people have we taken?" It drew numbers with shaking hands. Over the decades, it showed at least 40 individuals captured or killed by official programs. 40 beings with intelligence, families, lives, reduced to classified files and autopsy reports. And all of it hidden from the world, classified at the highest levels, because admitting they existed would mean admitting what we'd done to them. The creature set down the charcoal and looked at me with such profound sadness that I felt something break inside my chest. This was a person, not an animal, not a specimen, a person who'd watched its entire species be hunted to the edge of extinction by mine. A person who knew that even now, even here, it was a prisoner in a facility dedicated to studying something we refused to acknowledge as deserving basic rights. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it with every atom of my being. "I'm so sorry for what we've done." It tilted its head, studying me. Then it picked up the charcoal again and drew one more image. It drew a small figure, childlike, standing alone in a forest. It drew human figures in the distance, watching, and then it drew a cage around the small figure. Below the image, it drew what looked like a calendar, marking off days. Many, many days. "You have a child?" I realized, cold horror flooding through me. "And we took it? When did we take your child?" The creature's hand trembled as it marked the paper. 3 months ago, if I was reading the symbols correctly. 3 months since this being's child had been captured. I stood up so fast the chair scraped against concrete. "Dr. Vance," I said to the empty air, knowing she was watching through the glass. "Dr. Vance, get in here now!" She entered a minute later, her expression guarded. "What is it?" I pointed at the drawings. "We have its child. This subject was caught 9 days ago, but we've been holding its offspring for 3 months. Is that correct?" Dr. Vance's face went carefully neutral, which told me everything. There is a juvenile specimen in containment, yes, approximately 12 years old based on development markers. It was acquired in November in the same general region. Where? I demanded. Where are you keeping it? Agent Kellerman, that's not relevant to your assignment. The hell it isn't. You brought me here to establish communication, to understand these beings. Well, I'm understanding them just fine. This is a parent whose child was stolen. Every single piece of behavior you've observed makes perfect sense now. It's not eating because it's grieving. It's not responding because it's given up hope. You want communication? Reunite this subject with its child. Dr. Vance's expression hardened. That's not possible. The juvenile is part of a separate study. We can't simply... Can't or won't, I interrupted, because from where I'm standing, you've kidnapped a sapient being's offspring and are holding them in separate facilities. Do you understand what that means legally? Ethically? These subjects aren't classified as persons under any legal framework, she said coldly. They have no rights, no protections. They're specimens. They're people, I shouted, and the creature behind me made a sound, that low vocalization but louder now, resonant enough to vibrate in my chest. They're people and you know it, and that's exactly why this program is classified above nuclear secrets. Because if the world knew, if anyone outside this facility understood what you're doing, you'd all be facing charges for crimes against humanity. Dr. Vance stepped closer, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Agent Kellerman, you signed documents that prevent you from ever revealing what you've learned here. You're as complicit as anyone, and if you think you can expose this program, think again. We have resources and reach that extend further than you can imagine. So I suggest you complete your assignment, write your report, and go home to Seattle. Forget you were ever here. I looked back at the creature, at the being sitting quietly at the table, watching our argument with understanding in its eyes. It knew what was being said. It knew it was trapped, that its child was trapped, that we were all trapped in a system designed to maintain secrecy at any cost. And in that moment, I made a decision that would destroy my career and possibly my life. No, I said simply. No, I won't forget. And I won't complete this assignment the way you want. I want access to the juvenile. I want them brought together. And I want full access to all files on this species, every capture, every specimen, every piece of data you've collected. Or I walk out of here and go straight to every journalist, every politician, every person who'll listen. Dr. Vance's expression could have frozen nitrogen. You'd be arrested before you reach the parking lot. Maybe, I said, but I've been in law enforcement for 23 years. I know people. I know who to call, what to say, how to make sure the story doesn't die, even if I do. So the question is whether you want this program exposed messily, or whether you want to cooperate with someone who might actually help you understand what you're dealing with. We stared at each other for a long moment. Then Dr. Vance pulled out her phone and made a call. Bring the juvenile to Sigma 3. Yes, now. I don't care about the other study. Authorization Vance 77 Alpha. Do it. She hung up and looked at me with something between respect and hatred. You're making a mistake, Agent Kellerman. Some secrets exist for good reasons. Name one, I said. Name one good reason to hide the existence of another human species while we hunt them to extinction. She didn't answer. 20 minutes later, they brought in the child. It was smaller than the adult, maybe 6 feet tall, with lighter brown hair and eyes that went wide when it saw the larger creature. The adult stood up so fast the chair scraped backward, making a sound I'd never heard before, high and urgent. The juvenile made a similar sound and ran forward, and they collided in an embrace that was so purely, recognizably human that I felt tears burn in my eyes. The adult wrapped its massive arms around the younger one, making soft vocalizations, rocking gently. The juvenile clung to its parent, face pressed against the broad chest, making sounds that were unmistakably crying. They stayed like that for several minutes while Dr. Vance and I watched in silence. When they finally separated, the adult kept one hand on the juvenile's shoulder, protective and gentle. Then it turned to me and did something I'll never forget. It placed one hand over its chest, over its heart, and then extended that hand to me, a gesture of gratitude, of recognition that I'd done something that mattered. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "I want them kept together from now on," I said to Dr. Vance. "No more separation." "That complicates the research protocols," she began, but I cut her off. "I don't care about your protocols. These are people. Treat them like people or I walk." She nodded stiffly. "Fine, they'll be housed together." Over the next 5 days, something remarkable happened. With its child safe, the adult subject began to communicate more freely. It taught me its name, or at least the sound it made when referring to itself. A low musical tone I couldn't reproduce, but that I thought of as Cora. The child was Mika, a higher, lighter sound. And slowly, painstakingly, using drawings and gestures and a patience that humbled me, Cora began to tell me the history of its people. The story it revealed was more horrifying than I could have imagined. According to Cora's drawings and the oral history passed down through generations, there had once been many branches of the human family tree. Not just Homo sapiens and Neanderthals and Denisovans, but others. Cora's people, the ones we called Sasquatch or Bigfoot, were one of those branches. And for a long time, tens of thousands of years, the different branches coexisted, sometimes peacefully, sometimes in conflict, but coexisting. Then something changed. Modern humans, our direct ancestors, developed something the other branches didn't have. Not intelligence. Cora made it clear its people were just as intelligent. Not tool use. Not even language. What we developed was something darker. We developed the ability to organize violence on a massive scale. We developed warfare, coordinated hunting, the systematic elimination of competition. Cora showed me images of what could only be described as genocide. Our ancestors, spreading out of Africa, encountered the other human species and didn't just compete with them. We exterminated them, sometimes through direct violence, sometimes by taking their resources, their territories, forcing them into marginal lands where they couldn't survive. The Neanderthals fell, the Denisovans disappeared. And Cora's people, the forest people, only survived by doing something desperate. They hid, they adapted, they became nocturnal, secretive, avoiding all contact with us. They developed a culture built entirely around invisibility, around teaching each generation that humans were the great danger, the predator from which there was no defense except invisibility. And they watched us. For thousands of years, they watched us spread across the entire planet, building civilizations, developing technologies, transforming the world. They watched us and remembered what we'd done. They remembered being hunted, being killed, being driven to the edge of extinction. That memory was the core of their culture, passed down in stories and teachings. Stay hidden, avoid the violent ones, survive in silence. "But we kept finding you anyway," I said, looking at Cora's drawings. "Even with all your hiding, we kept hunting you." Cora nodded sadly. It drew more recent history, the last few centuries. Sporadic encounters that always ended the same way. Sometimes the humans who saw them were dismissed as crazy. Sometimes the evidence was explained away. But sometimes, especially in the last 100 years, the encounters led to capture or death. The governments knew. They'd always known. And they'd been systematically hiding the evidence while capturing specimens when possible. Cora drew one particularly haunting image. It showed a family of its people, 3 adults and 2 children, surrounded by soldiers in what looked like the 1960s based on the vehicles drawn. It showed them being tranquilized, loaded into trucks. Below the image, Cora drew a 0. None of them survived. "How many are left?" I asked. "How many of your people are still alive?" Cora thought for a long time. Then it drew groups scattered across a map that roughly corresponded to North America. Small clusters in the Pacific Northwest, the Rockies, the Appalachians, northern Canada. It held up both hands, fingers spread, then closed them into fists and opened them again. It repeated this gesture 17 times. roughly 340 individuals. That was all that remained of an entire human species. 340 people, scattered across millions of square miles of wilderness, hiding in the last places we hadn't completely colonized, living in terror, watching their numbers dwindle, knowing that eventually, inevitably, we would find them all. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Why communicate now, after your people have spent thousands of years hiding?" Cora picked up the charcoal and drew one final image. It showed a timeline extending into the future, but the figures of its people grew fewer and fewer until there were none left. Then it drew a human figure, alone, looking at blank space where the forest people used to be, and the human was crying. It was showing me extinction. Its people were dying out, and Cora knew it. But what struck me was the image of the human grieving. It wasn't showing me humans celebrating the elimination of competition. It was showing me a future where we would mourn what we'd destroyed, where we would realize too late that we'd eliminated something precious and irreplaceable. "You're not just telling me your story," I realized. "You're asking me to be a witness, to remember, because you know your people won't survive, and you want someone to know that you existed, that you were people, that your lives mattered." Cora placed its hand over its heart again, that gesture of profound meaning. Then it picked up a fresh piece of paper and drew something different. It drew a human child and one of its own children sitting side by side, not fighting, not fearing, just sitting together. It was showing me what could have been, what should have been. A world where our two species coexisted, learned from each other, built something together instead of one destroying the other. That image broke something inside me. I looked at Cora, at this being who'd lost so much, whose entire species was circling the drain of extinction because of my kind. And I saw in its eyes not hatred, not vengeance, but something harder to bear. Forgiveness, understanding, a sadness too deep for words. "I'll tell your story," I said. "Somehow, some way, I'll make sure people know. I'll make sure you're remembered." Cora nodded slowly. Then it did something unexpected. It reached into the thick hair around its neck and withdrew something small, something it had hidden there. A carved stone, no bigger than my palm, with symbols etched into its surface. It handed it to me carefully. The symbols matched some of the drawings it had made. This was writing. Its people had a written language. This artifact was proof not just of intelligence, but of culture, of civilization. It was invaluable, and Cora was giving it to me. "I'll keep it safe," I promised. "I'll protect it." What I didn't say was that I already knew what I had to do. This program had to be exposed. The truth about the forest people had to come out, even if it destroyed me. Because keeping them hidden meant watching them die in silence, being erased from history without acknowledgement, and I couldn't let that happen. Not after looking into Cora's eyes and seeing my own humanity reflected back at me. That night, I copied every file I could access. Medical records, DNA analyses, capture reports going back decades, photographs of specimens both living and dead, audio recordings of vocalizations, video footage of behavior studies. I violated every security protocol, broke every rule, committed what was undoubtedly treason according to the classification level of the material. I didn't care. Dr. Vance caught me around 3 in the morning. She found me in the records room, loading the last files onto encrypted drives. "I hoped you wouldn't do this," she said quietly. "I hoped you'd understand why we keep them secret, why we have to." "Have to?" I repeated. "You don't have to do anything. You chose this. You chose to hide them, study them, imprison them. You chose to let an entire species die in darkness." "We're trying to save them," she said, and for the first time I heard emotion in her voice. "Do you think this program exists to harm them? We're studying them to understand how to help them survive. Their genetics, their biology, their needs, how to preserve them. By putting them in cages?" I demanded. "By separating parents from children? By hiding their existence so they have no legal protections, no rights, nothing to prevent someone from hunting them down? If we revealed them, Agent Kellerman, what do you think would happen? Do you honestly believe humanity would protect them? We can barely protect endangered species that everyone agrees are just animals. What do you think people would do with a species that's almost human, that has intelligence and language and culture? Some would want to study them. Others would want to exploit them. Religious fundamentalists would lose their minds. Governments would fight over jurisdiction. And in all that chaos, the forest people would be destroyed even faster than they're disappearing now. She had a point. God help me, she had a point. But it didn't change the fundamental wrong of what we were doing. Then we tell the story carefully, I said. We control the narrative. We reveal them in a way that emphasizes their humanity, their right to exist. We make it politically and socially impossible to harm them. You're naive, Dr. Vance said. People are scared of anything that challenges their understanding of the world. These beings would terrify most of humanity. Maybe, I agreed, but keeping them secret while they die out is worse. At least give them a chance. Let the world know they exist. Let scientists who aren't bound by military classification study them. Let conservation organizations fight for their habitats. It's more than they have now. Dr. Vance was silent for a long moment. Then she did something I didn't expect. She sat down at one of the computer terminals and began typing. If you're going to expose this program, she said quietly, you should have all the facts, including the ones we've been hiding from our own government. She pulled up files I hadn't seen before, classified even beyond the material I'd already copied. And what I read made my blood run cold. The forest people weren't just dying out from loss of habitat and small population size. They were dying because weed poisoned them. Decades of industrial pollution, pesticides, heavy metals in the waterways where they fished and drank. Their isolated populations made them vulnerable to genetic drift and disease, but weed accelerated their decline by contaminating the last wild places where they could survive. And we knew. Government studies from the 70s had documented the impact. They'd known the pollution was killing the forest people, and they'd done nothing. Why? Because acknowledging the problem would mean acknowledging the species existed. We're monsters, I whispered. We're killing them, and we're doing it knowingly. Yes, Dr. Vance said simply. We are, and that's why I'm going to help you expose this. Because I've spent 15 years watching them die in our facilities, watching them grieve and suffer, and I can't do it anymore. I thought I was serving science. I thought classification was necessary. But you're right. Silence is just another form of extinction. She handed me a key card. This will get you out of the facility. Take your copies. Take the stone Cora gave you. And when you release the information, make sure people understand. Make them see the forest people as people. Make them care. Because if you just dump data without context, without humanity, they'll be dismissed as an interesting scientific footnote and nothing will change. What about you? I asked. She smiled sadly. I'm done after this. My career is over the moment you release those files. But maybe that's appropriate. Maybe I deserve to lose everything for being complicit this long. Come with me, I said. Help me tell the story. A scientist's voice will carry more weight than an FBI agent's. She shook her head. I need to stay here. Someone has to make sure Cora and Mika are treated well while the chaos unfolds. Someone has to protect the other subjects in containment. That's my responsibility now. My penance. I understood. Thank you, Dr. Vance. Sarah, she corrected. If we're committing career suicide together, you can call me Sarah. I left the facility just before dawn, driving through snow that had started falling again, turning the world white and silent. I didn't go back to Seattle. Instead, I drove to a journalist I trusted, someone I'd worked with on corruption cases, someone who wouldn't kill the story because it seemed impossible. It took 6 months to release everything properly. We needed verification, corroboration from other scientists, legal protection for the sources. We built a coalition of anthropologists, geneticists, conservation biologists, all willing to stake their reputations on the evidence. When the story finally broke, it exploded across every media platform simultaneously. Proof of another human species. Living specimens in government custody, decades of classified research, the suppression of one of the most important discoveries in history. The reaction was exactly the chaotic mess Sarah had predicted. Governments denied everything. Then, when the evidence became overwhelming, admitted to limited research programs while claiming humanitarian intentions. Religious groups fractured into those who rejected the evidence entirely and those who tried to fit it into their existing worldviews. Animal rights organizations demanded protection while debating whether beings this intelligent counted as animals at all. And the scientific community erupted in fierce debate about ethics, classification, conservation priorities. But something else happened too. Something beautiful. People cared. Millions of people who'd never given much thought to endangered species or conservation suddenly cared desperately about the survival of the forest people. Children wrote letters to their representatives demanding protection. Artists created works celebrating the majesty and tragedy of our lost cousins. Politicians, sensing the public mood, fell over themselves to propose legislation protecting any remaining populations. It wasn't perfect. There were still those who wanted to hunt them, study them, exploit them. But for the first time, the forest people had advocates. They had legal recognition. They had habitat protection. And most importantly, they were no longer invisible. Cora and Mika were released from custody 6 months after the story broke, along with every other forest person in government facilities. There were surprisingly few, only 11 individuals, total across all programs. 11 survivors of decades of classified research. They were released in different locations, places where we believed other small populations existed. Whether they found their people, whether they survived, I don't know. We made a commitment as part of their release. No tracking, no monitoring, no more surveillance. We would protect their habitats as best we could and leave them alone. Let them live without being studied, documented, analyzed. Give them the privacy and dignity we should have offered from the beginning. I was fired from the FBI, obviously, faced criminal charges for releasing classified information that were eventually dropped when the public outcry became overwhelming. My security clearance was revoked, my pension disappeared, I lost my career, my reputation in law enforcement, most of my friends who felt I'd betrayed the Bureau. But I kept one thing, the carved stone Cora gave me. I have it here in my cabin, sitting on the desk where I write. The symbols are still a mystery. We've had linguists and anthropologists examine photographs, but without living speakers of the language, they're just beautiful marks in stone. Evidence of a culture we barely glimpsed before it disappeared into the forest one final time. Sometimes I wonder if releasing the information helped or hurt. The forest people have legal protection now, but they also have something they never had before. Fame, notoriety. Every hiker with a camera is hoping for a sighting. Every documentary crew wants to be the first to film them in the wild. Conspiracy theorists claim governments are still capturing them. Cryptozoologists treat them like prizes to be discovered rather than people to be respected. Maybe Sarah was right. Maybe keeping them secret would have been kinder. But I can't accept that. Invisibility wasn't protecting them. It was just letting them disappear without witness. Now at least they have a chance. Now at least the world knows they existed, that they were people, that they mattered. I think about Cora often, about those eyes full of ancient sadness and impossible forgiveness, about a being who'd watched its entire species be hunted to the edge of extinction, who'd lost family and freedom to us, and who still chose to communicate rather than hate. Who still saw something worth preserving in the connection between our kinds. That's what haunts me most. Not the government conspiracy or the classified programs or even the revelation of another human species. What haunts me is how easily we became monsters, how naturally we classified thinking beings as specimens, how comfortably we justified imprisonment and separation and death in the name of science and security. Cora showed me something about humanity that I can't unsee. We're capable of extraordinary cruelty, especially when we can convince ourselves it's necessary, when we can classify the other as not quite human, as acceptable to harm in ways we'd never harm our own. The forest people were our cousins, as close to us as Neanderthals or Denisovans, and we hunted them for thousands of years. We drove them to the edge of extinction. And even when we knew they existed, when we had proof of their intelligence and personhood, we kept them in cages. Because acknowledging them would have been inconvenient. Because it would have challenged our understanding of what it means to be human. Because it was easier to keep them secret than to face what we'd done. That's the revelation Cora gave me. Not about its species, but about mine. We are capable of destroying our own family and sleeping soundly while doing it. As long as we can draw a line between us and them, as long as we can convince ourselves the others aren't quite people, we can justify anything. The forest people are probably doomed. Even with protection, even with public awareness, their numbers are too low, their populations too isolated. Genetic diversity has been lost. Critical habitats are already fragmented. We'll study them, protect them, do everything we can. But mathematics is unforgiving. In another century, maybe less, they'll likely be gone. And humanity will have successfully eliminated the last other branch of our family tree. We'll be alone then. The only human species left. The winners of a competition we didn't know we were in, a war we fought without acknowledging it was war, and we'll tell ourselves it was inevitable. Natural selection, survival of the fittest. We'll use the language of science to disguise what it really was: genocide. The systematic elimination of our own kind because they were different enough to fear and similar enough to threaten our sense of uniqueness. I hope I'm wrong. I hope the remaining forest people survive, adapt, find a way to persist in the margins we've left them. But hope isn't enough. It never was. What Cora taught me, what its people's entire tragic history demonstrates, is that hope must be coupled with action, with recognition of shared humanity, with the willingness to face uncomfortable truths about ourselves. The real horror isn't that another human species existed in hiding. The horror is that we knew. And we chose silence. We chose to let them disappear rather than confront the implications of their existence. We chose our comfort over their survival. That's the revelation. That's what keeps me awake at night in this cabin, turning that carved stone over in my hands, wondering if Cora is still alive somewhere in these forests, still teaching its child how to hide from us. The revelation isn't about Bigfoot, it's about us. About what we're capable of when we decide someone isn't quite human enough to matter. About how easily we become the monsters in someone else's story. And the most terrifying part? We're still doing it. The forest people are just one example. We draw lines between human and not quite human all the time. Based on species, yes, but also based on race, nationality, religion, ideology. We tell ourselves those others aren't like us, don't feel like us, don't matter like us. And once we've drawn those lines, once we've made that classification, we can justify anything we do to them. Cora understood this. That's why it chose to communicate, not to save its species, though I think it hoped that might happen, but to show me what we were doing, to hold up a mirror and make me see the monster reflected there. The forest people knew us better than we knew them. They watched us for thousands of years, studied us, understood us, and what they learned made them hide, made them teach their children that humans were too dangerous for contact, that we couldn't be trusted with the knowledge of their existence. They were right. Everything they feared about us came true, but Cora took a chance anyway, chose to trust one human with the truth, hoping that maybe one person could make a difference, could tell the story in a way that might change something. I don't know if I succeeded. The forest people have protection now, legal recognition, public awareness, but they're still dying, still hiding, still living in the diminishing wild spaces we haven't yet destroyed, still waiting for the inevitable end. Sometimes I get letters from people who've read the reports, seen the evidence, want to help. They ask what they can do, how to protect the forest people, how to make amends for thousands of years of persecution. I tell them the truth. Protect wilderness, fight climate change, reduce pollution, support conservation. All the things we should be doing anyway for 1,000 other reasons. But mostly, I tell them to remember. Remember that the forest people existed. Remember that they were people. Remember what we did to them and why. Remember so that maybe, possibly, we'll think twice before doing it again to someone else. That's what Cora asked of me. Not salvation, just memory, just witness, just someone to say that they were here, that they mattered, that their extinction was not inevitable natural selection, but the result of choices we made, choices we could have made differently. The carved stone sits on my desk, its symbols still mysterious, still beautiful, still speaking a language no human can read. It's all I have left of Cora. I don't know if it survived the release, if it found others of its kind, if it's teaching Mika how to live in a world that knows about them now. I hope so. I hope they're together somewhere, deep in these forests, away from cameras and curiosity seekers. I hope they found a family group, a community. I hope they're telling stories around whatever fires they dare to make, passing down their history one more generation, teaching their children about the world that was, the world that might have been, and the world they inherited. I hope they remember me the way I remember them, not with hatred, not with fear, but with that same profound sadness Cora showed me, the sadness of knowing what we could have been to each other, what we should have been, and what we became instead. That's the real horror Cora revealed. Not that monsters exist in the forest, but that the real monsters were us all along. We just never noticed, because the creatures we were destroying were too good at hiding, and we were too comfortable in our ignorance. And now that we know, now that the truth is out, we have to live with it, have to face what we've done, have to look in the mirror and see the species that hunted its own cousins to extinction because we couldn't tolerate shearing the world. I'm 61 years old now, the same age Cora was when I met it. I've lived 17 years carrying this knowledge, this weight. Some days it crushes me. Some days I can barely breathe under the magnitude of what we've lost, what we've destroyed. But I keep going. Keep telling the story, keep holding on to that stone and hoping that memory is enough, that bearing witness matters, that somewhere in these mountains, a parent is teaching a child to survive, and maybe, just maybe, teaching them that not all humans are monsters. That some of us tried, that some of us cared, that some of us looked into the eyes of our cousins and saw ourselves reflected back. That we saw and we grieved and we tried to make it right, even though it was far, far too late. The snow is falling again outside my window. The same snow that was falling the day I first entered that facility and learned that everything I thought I knew about the world was wrong. The forest is quiet, the way it always is in winter. But sometimes, late at night when the wind is right, I hear sounds in the distance. Low vocalizations that could be owls, or wind, or my imagination, or they could be Cora's people, still out there, still hiding, still surviving against impossible odds. I like to think they're real. I like to think the forest people endure, that they'll outlast us despite everything we've done. That thousands of years from now, when humanity has destroyed itself the way we destroyed them, they'll emerge from hiding and reclaim the world we stole. It's a comforting thought, a just thought, but probably just a thought. The truth is, they're dying. We're all dying, and all we can do is remember and hope that memory means something. That's what Cora taught me that winter in Idaho. Not facts about biology or evolution or cryptozoology, but something harder and more important, that every extinction is a choice. Every disappearance is the result of actions taken and not taken, and that the worst thing we can do is forget. Forget that they existed. Forget that we killed them. Forget that we had a choice and chose wrong. So I remember. I write it down. I tell the story to anyone who'll listen. I keep the stone safe and sacred. And late at night, when I hear those sounds in the forest, I whisper into the darkness. I remember. I saw you. I know what you were and what we did. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The wind carries my words into the trees, into the snow, into the silence where the last of the forest people hide. And I hope, desperately, impossibly, that somewhere out there, someone is listening. Someone remembers me the way I remember them, and knows that not all of us were monsters. Some of us tried, some of us failed, but we tried. And in the end, that's all I have left to offer. Failed attempts at redemption, late recognition of crimes too vast to comprehend, and the hollow promise that they'll be remembered after they're gone. It's not enough. It will never be enough, but it's all I have. So I sit in this cabin with my stone and my guilt and my memories, and I wait for the forest to forgive me for sins I can never undo, for crimes my entire species committed long before I was born, but that I perpetuated through my silence, my comfort, my willingness to let them disappear as long as it didn't disrupt my world. Cora forgave me. Or at least, it chose to trust me with its story. But I can't forgive myself, and I don't think I should. Some things we need to carry, some weight we need to feel, because forgetting how heavy it is means forgetting why it matters. The forest people are dying. We killed them. And the revelation Cora gave me wasn't about their nature. It was about ours. We are the horror in this story. We always were. We just told ourselves pretty lies so we wouldn't have to see it. Now I see, and I can't unsee. And all I can do is make sure you see it too. Make sure someone remembers. Make sure when the last of them is gone, when the forests fall silent and the caves are empty, someone somewhere knows what we lost, knows what we destroyed, knows what we were capable of, and what that says about us. That's the revelation. That's the horror. Not that Bigfoot was real, but that we met our cousins in the forest, looked into their eyes, saw ourselves reflected back, and still pulled the trigger. Still put them in cages. Still let them disappear. And the worst part? We'd do it again. Given the same circumstances, the same fears, the same need to be special and unique and alone at the top, we'd make the same choices, draw the same lines, justify the same cruelty. That's what keeps me awake. Not guilt over the past, though I carry that too, but fear of the future. Fear that Cora's people are just the beginning, that as we spread across the stars, colonize other worlds, encounter other forms of intelligence, we'll do it all again. We'll find new others to classify as not quite human, new cousins to hunt, new species to drive to extinction, while telling ourselves it's necessary, natural, inevitable. Unless we remember, unless we look honestly at what we did to the forest people and let it change us, let it horrify us, let it make us different. That's why I tell this story, not because I think it will save them. They're probably beyond saving. But because maybe, possibly, if enough people understand what we did and why it was wrong, we might do better next time. We might see the next other as deserving of life and dignity. We might choose differently. Cora believed that was possible. It had every reason to hate us, to refuse communication, to die in silence rather than trust a human with the truth. But it chose differently. Chose to believe that one person might understand, might care, might remember. I'm trying to honor that choice. Trying to be worthy of the trust a dying species placed in me. Trying to turn its gift of truth into something that matters. I don't know if I'm succeeding, but I know I have to try. For Cora, for Mika, for all the forest people who lived and died in hiding because we made the world too dangerous for them to exist in openly. For the future others we might encounter who deserve better than extinction at our hands. I tell the story. I keep the stone. I remember. And late at night, when the snow falls silent and the forest breathes with ancient patience, I listen. Listen for sounds that might be wind or might be something more. Might be voices in the darkness, speaking a language I'll never understand, singing songs I'll never translate. Might be the last remnants of our family, still surviving, still enduring, still hoping that somewhere in the violent species that hunted them, there's enough humanity left to regret what we've done. I hope they're right. I hope we're capable of regret, of change, of becoming something better than what we've been. But I don't know. All I know is that I saw them. I spoke with them. I looked into eyes that reflected my own humanity back at me, and I can never forget what that meant, what it means, what it will always mean. We were not alone. We had family, and we destroyed them because we couldn't bear to share. That's the revelation. That's the horror. That's the truth Cora died to tell me. And I'll carry it until the day I die, hoping that bearing witness is enough, knowing it probably isn't, but trying anyway, because some stories have to be told, even when no one wants to hear them, especially then. The snow keeps falling, the forest keeps its secrets, and somewhere in the darkness, I hope Cora's people survive one more winter, one more year, one more generation, long enough for us to become the species they hoped we could be, the species we should have been all along. But I'm not holding my breath, because I've seen what we are. Cora showed me, and that revelation is something I'll never escape.